This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to Money Made Simple, brought to you by Simplicity. I'm welcoming back Liv to the podcast today. Kia ora. It's been a while. How are you?
Yeah. Feels like it's been a very long time. Unfortunately, my dad very, very sadly passed away a few weeks ago. So, have had a lot going on. Interestingly, it was actually a few days after you and Glennis from PT recorded the Wills podcast, which was really freaky and weird. And the reason it's interesting is that my dad did not have an up-to-date will. The last time that he had written one was, I think, back in the early 2000s. And just going through all that now, it's really tough if you don't have an up-to-date will and you have
literally
assets. Yeah.
Got to live some of the situations that we were talking about.
So just a reminder, guys, go back to our last podcast, number 23, and learn all about wills and make sure you do it, because it will save a lot of pain and extra heartache for your loved ones if the worst can happen. But anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just don't know what's going to happen in life, do you?
No.
Anyway, it's really good to have you back, Liv.
It is good to be back.
And today, you and I are going to be chatting about something that we know people are asking of the Google and calling our investor services team about. And
I reckon it can be quite misunderstood as well from the feedback, certainly that we get in our socials, right?
Yeah, so what is this topic? Because we haven't actually said the name of it yet.
We're going to be talking about opting out of the KiwiSaver scheme, as well as KiwiSaver withdrawals. Caveat here, we obviously work for a KiwiSaver provider, being Simplicity, and our founder Sam set this particular scheme up to try and better the future of Kiwis. So we have a
biased point of view.
Yeah.
But while we definitely think that KiwiSaver is amazing, we do also understand that there are many different situations that people are facing at different points in their life.
So just for a moment, let's go back to basics. KiwiSaver is a voluntary scheme which you can either choose to join or be auto-enrolled into when you start your first job from 18. And as per a previous poddy's number 6, I think, there are different types of contributions to your account, which we cover in a lot of detail in that episode, so we'll link to the show notes. Anyway, once you join the scheme, there's a general lock-in through to age 65, given that it is literally a retirement-based scheme.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth talking a bit more about that, like why KiwiSaver was set up. It was primarily designed to address what was seen as a retirement savings problem. Kiwis were not traditionally good at saving.
Still not.
No, but we're getting better. You know, too many people were reaching retirement age without enough money saved to actually enjoy their retirement, to have a comfortable retirement. So KiwiSaver was set up to give us an easy way to save over the long term. It obviously doesn't immediately fix the issue, but it's a way to build wealth. And for young people especially, it's going to be a really powerful way to save over the years.
And around today's topic, obviously these savings are very much impacted by the actions that you take around either opting out or withdrawing your funds early, or even pausing your own contributions, all of which we'll cover soon.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get cracking. Let's talk about opting out of KiwiSaver altogether. Liv, why would anyone want to do this?
I have no idea. No, I do. There are a few valid reasons that you can opt out. So having a superannuation scheme and not wanting to have both. I actually used to have a superannuation scheme when I worked for New Balance for a number of years. For all employees across Australasia, we had a 5% employer and employee match thing, which was cool.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a few vocational schemes. So, you know, the nurses union might have a scheme, or the teachers union. So you may have decided to join their superannuation scheme rather than KiwiSaver.
Yeah, and so that's not KiwiSaver. So then if you get opted into KiwiSaver, you might want to opt out and say, no, I've got that scheme already, so I'm already saving for retirement. Also, in some cases, people may feel like they would prefer to have more control over their savings or investments, and they don't want to lock them up. So if they want to retire early, like the FIRE movement, and use those funds early, or if they believe that they can manage their own investments better, and they have the extreme discipline not to raid any of their nest egg before retirement.
Yeah, so someone like me, that's not going to be possible. I wouldn't be able to have a retirement scheme outside of KiwiSaver where it's sort of locked in because I'd do something silly.
Being the hot mess that you are. So I mean, in my opinion, I think that a lot of the people who opt out may not quite understand well enough the many benefits of KiwiSaver. Another quite common thing that seems to crop up is that people aren't able to get their heads around the need to grow their long-term retirement savings. It's that old adage of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and if you're talking about young people in retirement,
So far away.
so
right?
far away.
So many things to spend money on in the meantime, like you would if you weren't restricted in your KiwiSaver. But there may be a whole lot of other reasons that we aren't covering why people opt out. The fact is that it is a voluntary scheme, and this means that people can and often do opt out.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, that's one of the criticisms of KiwiSaver is that it's
Absolutely.
voluntary.
Yes.
In other parts of the world, including Australia, it
Yeah.
is compulsory.
Yep. But let's discuss how it works. So, Jenny, who can opt out?
Okay, well, you can opt out of KiwiSaver in a period of time just after you've been automatically enrolled.
So not if you've chosen a provider, right?
No, if you have picked a KiwiSaver provider and you have signed up via that provider, then there's no opting out. But if you were, say, 18 and you'd started your first job, then your employer might automatically enroll you via either their preferred provider, Simplicity, for example, or if they didn't select, you would go with one of the 6 default providers. That happens
Which,
automatically.
Like being a
ARD.
preferred provider, we're also a default provider.
We are, so you can't escape us. We're everywhere.
Cool. Timing wise, you can generally opt out after that auto enrollment between 2 weeks and 8 weeks after you start your job.
Yeah, so it's pretty prescriptive, that period of time.
After that day 56 or 8 week mark, there are some cases you can still opt out before it gets to 3 months in the scheme, but it's not a given. So a couple of examples, if there was no product disclosure statement provided, or your employer didn't issue a KS3 form within 7 days, or if you had a valid reason for not opting out by that 8 week cutoff. There are also a couple of scenarios around if you're under 19 where you can opt out after that 8 week period, but they're quite specific and a bit complex. If you are literally 17 or 18 and you want to know that stuff, the IRD website has more info. So we will link in the show notes to some
Right.
information on the IRD website.
Yeah. So in some ways, the whole way that KiwiSaver is set up, basically it's designed for people who don't think about this stuff too much and they'll just end up saving for their retirement without too much thought. And it's same with this automatic enrollment. In some ways, it's like you do have a window to get out, but we're hoping most people just won't do it.
Because it's a good idea.
Because it's a good idea.
To stay in it.
Yeah. So if you do want to opt out, how do you go about opting out in that 2 to 8 week period?
So basically you need to obtain what is called a KS10 form, and then this can be given to your employer or straight to the IRD.
And what happens at that point?
So a few things go into this process. The IRD processes the request and notifies your employer if you haven't already given that form to your employer. The employer then stops making the contributions and they stop deducting your own contributions from your pay. Any contributions that have already been made get refunded, so your employee contributions go back to you. But just a note that the employer contributions go back to them.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah,
So you don't get to keep it all.
No, not at all. And then depending on whether you've opted out by the end of your week 8 of employment or if you ended up getting a late opt-out signed off, it can take around 30 days for the former or 3 months for the latter to get any of those refunds. So it takes time. Anyway, let's chat quickly about what you actually miss out on if you decide to opt out of KiwiSaver. Jenny, can you start us off on
Of course.
the disadvantages?
Well, yeah, there are a few main things that you should think about. If you opt out of KiwiSaver, you are going to miss out on employer contributions, which, as we've talked about before, the minimum contribution rate is 3% of your wage or salary that's coming from your employer. If you opt out, you don't get any of this.
No,
so
they're off
even
the
if
hook,
that-
right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you're missing out on. The second thing is government contributions. Again, something we've talked about in the past, but if you are a KiwiSaver member and you're eligible, you can get up to $521 of basically free money every year from the government. So you'll be missing out on your employer contributions and also your government contributions.
Yeah. Another one is that discipline that applies by having your KiwiSaver funds locked away. So generally, and we're going to go through the reasons where you can't touch your nest egg until either you make a qualifying first home withdrawal or you reach the retirement age, which is currently 65.
But if you have different savings of your own, you can access that whenever you want, even if
Exactly.
you've called it retirement savings.
Yes, might not end up being retirement savings. And finally, I think there's a couple around having a professional fund manager and team managing your investments. So this is their day job. This is what they do. And they're likely to be pretty good at it. Also, it's a really easy to manage system or way to invest. So most providers have a good member interface that's easy to use, and there's plenty of funds and different options available.
Yeah, and it's just set up, right? Your employer's making contributions, you're making contributions, the government contributions, everything's almost happening
Like
automatically.
automatically. Yeah. Very low
low touch.
Yeah, very low touch.
Okay, so I think it's probably pretty obvious which way we swing. We don't think it's a great idea to opt out, mainly because we think the benefits just vastly outweigh any disadvantages that we can see.
Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to KiwiSaver withdrawals. And we don't mean withdrawing your funds once you get to 65. There are a limited number of valid reasons.
Well, not just valid, Liv. They're actually the law.
Right.
They are legal parameters around what you can withdraw. And there's an act called the KiwiSaver Act, very creatively.
Yeah, got it. You may be able to withdraw from your KiwiSaver fund before 65. So we'll discuss those reasons one by one. So, Jenny, what's the obvious one?
Well, the obvious one is the first home withdrawal. For a lot of people, that is the first opportunity that they're going to get to withdraw from their KiwiSaver. No, I've kind of missed the boat a little bit.
So basically, you have to have been in the KiwiSaver scheme for at least 3 years.
Yep.
You can take out most of it. So you can take out your employee, your employer contributions and government contributions and any returns, obviously, that you get. You have to, for some reason, leave $1,000 in the account.
I think that's just a rule that means that you're not starting back from zero.
Right. And also, you can't take out any funds that have been transferred from an Aussie super scheme.
Yeah, and that is a common one, right? Lots of particularly young New Zealanders go to Aussie for a few years and then come back.
Okay, next is when you move permanently overseas. So what's the deal here?
Well, if you've moved anywhere in the world other than Australia and you've been living in that place for 12 months or more, you can either withdraw most of your KiwiSaver funds or transfer them to an approved foreign superannuation scheme. You can take your employee and your employer contributions, any returns that you've made, but you can't take the government contributions. So they stay in New Zealand in KiwiSaver. You can't transfer them and you can't withdraw them.
Yeah. And Australia is a bit different, right?
Yes, they have a slightly different rule for Australia. You can't just withdraw the funds if you've moved there. So you've only got one option. If you're moving to Aussie, you have to transfer it into an Aussie super scheme.
You don't have to. You can actually keep your KiwiSaver funds back here if you want to.
That is a very good point.
Yes. So you could keep KiwiSaver here and then your Australian super scheme, just start it from fresh and have two different schemes.
So if you just want to let that investment tick over and you start a new scheme in Aussie, that's,
cool. Okay, so next is withdrawing funds either for financial hardship or serious illness.
Yeah, these two particular withdrawals come with a lot of rules which are set by the government. They're not set at provider level. They are, again, kind of part of that legal structure of KiwiSaver.
Yeah. So with significant financial hardship, there's a bit of a process to follow. So once you've filled out a significant hardship form, then there's a process that your provider needs to go through with you to establish if there's enough evidence of hardship. Evidence could be things like not meeting your minimum living costs, not being able to pay your mortgage or your rent, not being able to pay necessary medical costs for you or dependents, etc. And then the KiwiSaver provider doesn't actually make the decision on if and how much you can withdraw, right?
Yeah, no, that's not up to the provider. That's a decision that's made by the supervisor of the scheme. In our case, that's Public Trust. But every KiwiSaver provider will have their own trustee or supervisor who will make those decisions independently.
Yeah. A common misunderstanding here also is around full versus part withdrawals. So with financial hardship, if it's approved, it won't necessarily be your full balance and quite unlikely to be your full balance, right?
Yeah, they're going to make a decision about the amount of money that you need to get through this period of hardship. It may be less than what you applied for or hoped for.
Or what you think you should.
Yeah, but they will deem the amount. And actually, it's probably just quickly worth mentioning here that we work with a third party called DebtFix. So anyone that's making a hardship application through Simplicity will get this sort of wraparound financial support, and this amazing group will try and help people essentially avoid having to get their KiwiSaver funds out.
Because generally it's not a good idea, right?
Yes, but if they do put a successful application through, then they will help them use that money to get through this period of hardship.
Out of debt or hardship.
Yeah, and into a better position. So it's a great group that we're working with.
Cool. And then there are withdrawals for serious illness or life-shortening congenital conditions. So when it's fairly obvious that you may not make it to retirement age. But yeah, there's a lot of detail again on the IRD website around that and how you can make a part or a full withdrawal because of illness
and it's a similar
disease
process in terms of making an application. You may need to provide some supporting documentation, and then that goes to the supervisor again.
Cool. There's a couple of other reasons for withdrawing before 65. Bankruptcy is one reason, which is kind of, I guess, related to financial hardship. In the case of relationship property, which is when a marriage or de facto relationship breaks down, it's actually part of your relationship property.
Something to think about.
And like in the case of my late father recently, when someone dies, that KiwiSaver fund becomes part of their estate.
Okay, so these are the reasons why you can take money out of KiwiSaver prior to retirement. I think we probably want to talk about the consequences. So what is the impact of making a withdrawal?
Well, it's potentially a significant impact on your balance, either for first home or at retirement, if you withdraw outside of those reasons, both from the money that you directly take out of your fund and the potential compounding returns that money could have made over the long term.
Yeah, so it's not just the actual dollar amount that you're taking out, but the amount of money that money could have made.
Yes, money makes money, as we like to say.
Yeah, so it's really about balancing your needs right now with the long-term impact that's going to have.
The consequences.
It's definitely worth thinking about the future impact of any decisions you're making now.
Cool. Now, obviously, we've talked about the case for making withdrawals from your KiwiSaver account if you have the reasons to need to do so, but there is the option of a KiwiSaver savings suspension.
Yeah, this might be an interim way of just taking a little bit of pressure off yourself in terms of your weekly expenses without hugely impacting your future, because your money's staying in there, it's invested, and it's going to keep making money. You can take a savings suspension for 3 months up to a year. Employees in a scheme who have been contributing for 12 months or more don't need to provide a reason, and you can take as many as you need. So if after 3 months you decide that you actually need a little bit longer,
you can extend it and take another one.
Yes.
Basically.
And actually, sorry, I didn't mention that. You do this through the IRD.
Yep.
So you don't even need to actually talk to your employer about it. You can apply via the IRD.
Yep. An important note here, while you're on a savings suspension, you will not get employer contributions unless you've got a badass, amazing employer who has stated in an agreement or to you that they will keep contributing even if you take a break.
Yeah, and you might miss out on the government contribution too, depending on how much you've already contributed within a KiwiSaver.
So just a reminder that you need to contribute 1,043 to get that maximum government contribution if you're eligible.
So it's not that this option is not going to impact your long-term savings.
Absolutely
It is, but it is a measure that's one step away from making a withdrawal, and it may just give you a little bit of breathing room. And I think in a previous episode, because I treat these all like confessions of some kind.
Confessions of a hot mess.
I mentioned that I had taken
a few, didn't you?
Yes, a number of extended saving suspensions, which I do now regret, but at the time I wasn't.
You felt like you needed them.
Yeah. And I wasn't informed.
Yeah. You can actually still apply for a saving suspension if you've been in the KiwiSaver scheme for less than 12 months. But when you apply, you would need to provide evidence of financial hardship. So just a note that it's,
So early on, under 12 months, you have to make a case for yourself. After you've been in the scheme for 12 months, you don't need to give any reasons to take a suspension.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. I think that is it for today. So we've covered how and why you'd potentially opt out of KiwiSaver. And just a note here, because I said we'd cover it, you can opt back into the KiwiSaver scheme at any time if you have opted out.
Yes, but just a note on that. A note on your note. If you opt back in, you're going to choose a provider and you're going to enroll that way. You can then not opt out again.
Right. So opting out only happens once.
Yes, and that's if you've been automatically enrolled.
We covered the reasons that you may be able to withdraw some or most of your KiwiSaver funds before turning 65, but also the consequences that can come off the back of those. And a lot of the information that we've talked about comes from the IRD website, so we will put those links into the show notes.
Yeah, I think the IRD is a great source of information for all of this.
Yeah. Cool. So what's coming up next time?
Oh, well, we have another guest. I'm going to let you talk to the next person, Liv.
I owe you a few episodes, don't I?
Yeah. Well, we've got one of our colleagues coming in, Matt. He is our head of private capital. We haven't talked much on the podcast about our investment team here at Simplicity, but Matt's doing really interesting work investing in some local New Zealand companies, and he's going to come and talk to you about what they're doing and why these investments are good for our investors.
Yes, it's a win-win, as we always like to say.
We sure do.
Cool. Anyway, we will catch you next time.
Great to have you back, Liv.
Thank you.
Bye.
Guys. This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website, simplicity.kiwi.